The security guard at the Las Vegas Hilton put his hand up to stop them.
Ma'am, I really don't think this is appropriate.
Your son, he's different. The crowd, the noise. What if he disrupts the show? What if he has an episode? Sarah Patterson felt her face flush with anger and hurt. She'd heard variations of this her whole life since Tommy was born. Too different, too disruptive, too much. But she looked down at her 9-year-old son, who was clutching his worn Elvis record with both hands. His face lit up with hope, and she said firmly, "My son has every right to be here. We're going in." Nobody in that arena that night. Not the security guards, not the 15,000 fans, not even Elvis's own band, could have predicted what would happen next. Because when Elvis Presley saw Tommy Patterson dancing in the third row, everything changed. Not just for Tommy, not just for that concert, but for millions of children with disabilities around the world. It was August 3rd, 1975 at the Las Vegas Hilton, and Sarah Patterson had been planning this night for 6 months. Tommy, her 9-year-old son, who had Down syndrome, was absolutely obsessed with Elvis Presley. Every morning he'd wake up and put on the same Elvis record, "Love Me Tender," and he'd dance around the living room with the biggest smile on his face. He knew every word to every song, even if his speech wasn't always clear to others. His teachers at the special education school had told Sarah that music was Tommy's way of expressing himself, his way of connecting to the world, and there was no music Tommy loved more than Elvis. Sarah had saved every spare dollar from her job as a secretary to buy 2 tickets to Elvis's Las Vegas show. She knew it would be expensive, she knew it would be difficult, but she also knew that seeing Elvis in person would be the greatest gift she could give her son. What she hadn't anticipated was the resistance she'd face just trying to get through the door. After the confrontation with the security guard, Sarah and Tommy finally made their way to their seats. They were in the third row, slightly to the left of center stage. Tommy could barely contain his excitement. He was bouncing in his seat, making happy noises, his hands flapping with pure joy. But Sarah noticed something that made her heart sink. The people around them were staring, some with curiosity, some with obvious annoyance, some with that particular kind of discomfort that comes when people don't know how to act around someone who's different. A woman in the row behind them leaned forward and tapped Sarah on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with false politeness. "Is your son going to be making noise like that during the whole show? Because we paid a lot of money for these tickets." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. "My son is excited to see Elvis just like everyone else here," she replied evenly. The woman huffed and sat back, whispering something to her husband. Sarah could feel eyes on them from all directions. She put her arm around Tommy, who was oblivious to the tension, still bouncing and humming, lost in his own world of anticipation. For a moment Sarah wondered if she'd made a mistake bringing him. Maybe the security guard was right. Maybe this was too much. Then the lights dimmed and the crowd erupted into screams. Tommy's eyes went wide with wonder as the stage lights came up, and Elvis Presley walked out in his iconic white jumpsuit, studded with jewels that caught the light like stars. The opening chords of C.C. Rider filled the arena, and Elvis launched into his set with all the energy and charisma that had made him a legend. Tommy was transfixed. He stood up in his seat, not to block anyone's view, but because he physically couldn't contain his joy. He started moving to the music, his movements uncoordinated by conventional standards, but filled with such pure, uninhibited happiness that it was beautiful to watch. Sarah glanced around nervously, expecting more complaints, more stares. And there were stares, but she also noticed something else. A few people were smiling. An older man, 2 rows up, had turned around and was watching Tommy with a gentle expression on his face. Elvis moved through his set with his usual showmanship, working the crowd, throwing scarves, making eye contact with fans in the front rows. He sang Burning Love, Hound Dog, and all shook up. The audience was eating it up, screaming and cheering at every hip swivel, every note. But then, about 45 minutes into the show, something shifted. Elvis was in the middle of Can't Help Falling in Love, one of his most tender ballads, when his eyes landed on Tommy. The little boy was still dancing, but now he was doing something else too. He was singing along. Every word. His voice wasn't strong enough to be heard over the music and the crowd, but Elvis could see his lips moving perfectly in sync with the lyrics, and the expression on Tommy's face was one of absolute pure love for the music. Elvis stopped singing for just a moment, just long enough that his band members glanced at each other, wondering what was happening. Elvis was staring at this little boy in the third row, this child who was different from the others, who moved differently, who expressed joy differently, but who was connecting to the music in a way that was completely genuine. Charlie Hodge, Elvis's longtime guitarist and friend, later said that he saw something change in Elvis's face at that moment, like he just remembered why he started performing in the first place. Not for the fame or the money or the screaming fans, but for moments of pure human connection through music. Elvis walked to the edge of the stage, still singing, but now he was singing directly to Tommy. The crowd around the boy had started to notice Elvis's attention shifting in their direction. Some people were excited, thinking Elvis might be looking at them, but Elvis's eyes never left Tommy. When the song ended, instead of moving on to the next number like usual, Elvis did something unexpected. He set down his microphone, said something to his band that the audience couldn't hear, and then addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying that familiar, warm, southern charm, "I want to share something with you tonight, something real special." The arena quieted down, everyone wondering what Elvis was about to do. "I've been performing for a long time," Elvis continued. "I've sung for presidents and kings, for millions of people all over the world. But you know what I just saw? I saw something that reminded me what music is really about." He pointed directly at Tommy. "That young man right there, in the third row. What's your name, son?" Tommy, usually so verbal in his own way, suddenly went shy. He looked up at his mother with wide, uncertain eyes. Sarah, her heart pounding, stood up and spoke for him. "His name is Tommy," she called out. "Tommy Patterson. He loves you, Elvis. He loves your music more than anything in the world." Elvis smiled, a genuine, warm smile that lit up his entire face. "Tommy," he said, "I can see that. I've been watching you dance, buddy. And you know what? You've got better moves than half the people I know." The audience laughed, but it was a warm laugh, not a cruel one. "I'll tell you what, Tommy," Elvis continued. "How would you like to come up here and show everyone how it's done? Dance with me, up here on stage." The audience erupted, some in cheers, some in surprise. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. She looked down at Tommy, who was staring at Elvis with an expression of wonder and disbelief. But she also saw something else in her son's eyes. Fear. All those years of being told he was too different, too much, too disruptive. They'd left their mark. Sarah knelt down next to Tommy and whispered in his ear, "Baby, do you want to go up there? You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you do, I'm right here. Mommy's right here." Tommy looked at his mother, then back at Elvis, who was still standing at the edge of the stage with his hand extended, waiting patiently. And then Tommy nodded. A small nod at first, then more vigorous. He wanted to go. He wanted to dance with Elvis. Security guards appeared to help them navigate to the stage. As Sarah lifted Tommy up toward Elvis, she whispered a quick, desperate plea. "Please be patient with him. He's not like other kids. He might not understand everything. He might not do what you expect." Elvis reached down and took Tommy's small hand in his much larger ring-adorned one. "Ma'am," he said, looking directly into Sarah's eyes, Your son is perfect exactly as he is, and up here on my stage, all that matters is the music." Elvis pulled Tommy up onto the stage with a gentleness that surprised everyone who knew his usual high-energy performance style. Tommy stood there for a moment, overwhelmed by the lights, the massive crowd, the surreal nature of standing next to his hero. 15,000 people were watching him. This little boy who'd been told his whole life that he was too different to fit in. Elvis knelt down so he was at Tommy's eye level. "You okay, buddy?" he asked quietly, his microphone not picking up the intimate moment. Tommy nodded, his hands starting to flap again, a self-soothing behavior that Sarah knew meant he was processing intense emotions. Elvis, instead of being put off by this, smiled. "You excited?" Tommy nodded more vigorously. "Me too," Elvis said. "Want to know a secret? I get nervous up here sometimes too." Elvis stood up and addressed his band. "Boys, let's play something my friend Tommy and I can really move to. Let's do Jailhouse Rock." The band launched into the driving rhythm of Jailhouse Rock, and something magical happened. Tommy, who had been nervous and overwhelmed just seconds before, suddenly came alive. He started moving, his unique, uncoordinated but utterly joyful dance style completely unleashed. He spun in circles. He jumped up and down. His arms flailed in movements that didn't match any conventional dance choreography, but were perfectly in time with the music in his own way. And Elvis, the king of rock and roll himself, started dancing right along with him, not with his usual polished moves, but matching Tommy's energy, his spontaneity, his pure joy. The audience didn't know how to react at first. Some people were silent, watching this unusual scene unfold. But then something beautiful started to happen. One person started clapping along, then another, then a whole section. Within 30 seconds, the entire arena of 15,000 people was on their feet, clapping and cheering, not for Elvis's polished performance, but for Tommy's uninhibited celebration of music. There wasn't a hint of mockery in it. It was pure, genuine appreciation for the joy this little boy was expressing. Elvis was grinning ear to ear, encouraging Tommy, spinning him around, even at one point going down on one knee and letting Tommy stand on his thigh to be elevated above the crowd. The image of Elvis Presley, in his jeweled white jumpsuit, holding up a little boy with Down syndrome while they both danced to Jailhouse Rock, became one of the most iconic moments in Las Vegas entertainment history. When the song ended, Tommy was breathless and beaming. Elvis picked him up and held him close, speaking into the microphone so everyone could hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Tommy Patterson. Tommy, you just made this the best show I've ever done." The applause was deafening. It went on for a full 3 minutes. People were crying, not tears of pity, but tears of joy at witnessing something so genuine, so human, so completely devoid of pretense. Elvis carried Tommy to the edge of the stage where Sarah was standing, tears streaming down her face. He handed Tommy back to her, but before he let go, he said something that Sarah would never forget. "Don't you ever let anyone tell you that your son doesn't belong somewhere. You hear me? He belongs everywhere." And he just proved it to 15,000 people. But that's not where this story ends. What happened that night had ripple effects that nobody could have predicted. Someone in the audience had brought a camera, which was technically against the rules, and they'd captured the entire interaction on film. Within days, photographs of Elvis dancing with Tommy were circulating in newspapers across the country. The images were powerful. Here was Elvis Presley, at the height of his fame, dancing with pure joy alongside a child with Down syndrome, treating him not as a charity case or a publicity stunt, but as an equal, as someone worthy of sharing his stage. The disability rights community, which in 1975 was just beginning to gain momentum, seized on these images as proof of what they'd been arguing all along, that people with disabilities deserved inclusion, deserved respect, deserved to be treated as full members of society. Dr. Richard Morrison, The same doctor who had advised Sarah not to take Tommy to the concert saw the photographs in the newspaper. He was struck by something he saw in the images. Tommy's face showed an expression of pure joy and confidence that Dr. Morrison had rarely seen in children with Down syndrome. It made him question his own assumptions. Within 6 months, Dr. Morrison had completely changed his approach to treating children with developmental disabilities. He started recommending music therapy, social inclusion, and pushing families to expose their children to normal life experiences, rather than keeping them sheltered. He later published a paper titled The Elvis Effect, Reconsidering Social Inclusion for Children with Down Syndrome, which became influential in special education circles. Sarah Patterson started receiving letters, hundreds of them, from parents of children with disabilities all over the country, thanking her for taking Tommy to that concert, for not letting the security guard stop her, for giving their own children hope that they too could participate in normal life experiences. One letter came from a mother in Ohio who wrote, "I've been afraid to take my daughter anywhere public because of how people stare. But after seeing Tommy dance with Elvis, I realized I've been robbing her of joy to protect her from judgment. We went to a county fair last weekend. She rode the carousel through times. Thank you for showing me what's possible." These letters piled up on Sarah's kitchen table, and she realized that what had happened that night was bigger than just her and Tommy. It had become a symbol. Elvis, for his part, was deeply affected by the experience. Joe Esposito, his road manager, later revealed that Elvis talked about Tommy constantly after that night. He kept saying, "Did you see that kid's face? That's what music is supposed to do. That's why we're really here." From that night forward, Elvis made it a point to look for people in his audiences who seemed marginalized or overlooked. It wasn't always as dramatic as bringing them on stage, but he'd make eye contact, acknowledge them, make sure they felt seen. His band members noticed a shift in his performances. He seemed to care less about hitting every note perfectly and more about creating moments of genuine connection. The Las Vegas Hilton, initially worried about the publicity from the incident, fearing it might be seen as disruptive, instead found themselves praised for being inclusive. They changed their policies, making sure that security guards were trained to welcome families with special needs rather than turning them away. Within a year, they'd established special sensory-friendly performances, designated quiet spaces, and staff training on disability awareness. Other venues around the country followed suit. The movement toward accessible entertainment spaces that we take for granted today can trace some of its roots back to that night in August 1975, when Elvis danced with Tommy. Tommy Patterson grew up to become a music teacher working specifically with children with special needs. In interviews he gave as an adult, he always credited that night with Elvis as the moment he realized he had something valuable to offer the world. "Elvis didn't treat me like I was broken or less than," Tommy said in a 2010 interview, his speech much clearer now after years of therapy, but still carrying the distinctive patterns of Down syndrome. "He treated me like I was a dancer, like I was his equal. That changed everything for me. It made me believe I could do things." Sarah Patterson kept the ticket stubs from that concert in a frame on her wall for the rest of her life. Below them, she placed one of the newspaper clippings showing Elvis and Tommy dancing together, and she wrote in careful handwriting, "The night my son taught the world about joy." The security guard who had tried to stop them from entering that night, whose name was Frank Delgado, actually reached out to Sarah a year later. He wrote her a letter apologizing for his behavior. He explained that he'd been trained to see anything unusual or different as a potential problem to be managed rather than as a person to be welcomed. "Watching Elvis dance with your son on that stage," Frank wrote, "taught me more about what it means to be a decent human being than anything else in my 50 years of life. I'm sorry I almost robbed you both of that moment. I'm trying to be better." Sarah wrote back, forgiving him, and the two became unlikely friends, often speaking at disability rights events together about the importance of inclusion and challenging our own prejudices. In 1982, a group of special education teachers and parents established the Tommy Patterson Foundation, dedicated to promoting music education and performance opportunities for children with developmental disabilities. They reached out to Sarah for permission to use Tommy's name, and she agreed on one condition: that every child in their programs be treated not as someone receiving charity, but as an artist with something valuable to share. The foundation has since helped thousands of children with disabilities access music education, performance opportunities, and the joy that comes from creative expression. Every year they hold an event called the Elvis Dance Party, where children with and without disabilities dance together, recreating the spirit of that August night. The footage that was captured that night, initially bootleg photographs and later some grainy video that surfaced, has been used in countless documentaries about disability rights, about Elvis's humanitarian side, and about the power of inclusion. Researchers have analyzed those images, noting the genuine joy on both Elvis's and Tommy's faces, the way Elvis adapted his movements to match Tommy's rather than trying to correct him, the respect and equality evident in their interaction. It's become a teaching tool in special education programs, showing future teachers what true inclusion looks like. It's not about making someone with differences conform to normal expectations. It's about creating space for everyone to participate in their own authentic way. Elvis kept in touch with the Patterson family after that night. He sent Tommy birthday cards every year until Elvis's death in 1977. Each card contained a personal message in Elvis's distinctive handwriting, always encouraging Tommy to keep dancing, keep singing, keep being exactly who he was. When Elvis died, Tommy was 13 years old. Sarah later said that Tommy's grief was profound, but that he processed it through music, playing Elvis records and dancing in the living room just like he had as a little boy. At Elvis's funeral, Presley made a point of finding Sarah and Tommy in the crowd. She hugged Tommy and told him, "Elvis talked about you often. He said dancing with you reminded him why he fell in love with music in the first place. You gave him a gift that night too." The cultural impact of that moment extended into medical and educational communities in ways that are still being felt today. In the late 1970s and throughout the 1980s, there was a major shift in how society viewed and treated people with Down syndrome and other developmental disabilities. The move away from institutionalization toward community integration, the emphasis on inclusive education rather than separate special schools, the recognition that people with disabilities could lead fulfilling, meaningful lives. All of these movements were gaining momentum. And while it would be an overstatement to say that Elvis dancing with Tommy caused all of this, it certainly contributed to changing public perception. Those images showed 15,000 people, and eventually millions more, through newspaper coverage, that inclusion could be joyful, natural, and mutually enriching. Today, the third row center section at the theater that replaced the Las Vegas Hilton has a small plaque that reads, "In this section on August 3, 1975, Tommy Patterson taught the world about pure joy. Elvis Presley taught the world about true acceptance. Together they reminded us that everyone deserves a place on the dance floor." Performers who play that venue often ask about the plaque, and when they hear the story, many report that it changes how they think about their audiences. One performer said, "I used just scan the crowd for the people who were screaming the loudest or looked the coolest. Now I look for the people who might feel like they don't belong. Those are the ones who sometimes need the music most." Sarah Patterson passed away in 2019 at the age of 78, but not before seeing her son Tommy live a full, independent life, something doctors had told her would be impossible when he was born. At her funeral, Tommy, now in his 50s, stood up and spoke about his mother. He talked about her courage in pushing back against the security guard that night, her refusal to accept other people's limitations on what he could do or experience. And then he talked about Elvis, Elvis could have ignored me, Tommy said, his voice steady and clear. He could have seen me as a disruption or a charity case. Instead, he saw me as someone who loved music just as much as he did. He gave me dignity. He gave me joy. He gave me confidence to live my life without apology. That's what my mama wanted from me. And thanks to Elvis, that's what I got. The story of Elvis and Tommy reminds us that inclusion isn't just about being nice or politically correct. It's about recognizing the humanity in every person and creating spaces where everyone can experience joy, can contribute, can be fully themselves. It's about challenging our own prejudices and assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't. That security guard at the Las Vegas Hilton had been trained to see Tommy as a potential problem. The audience members who stared uncomfortably had been conditioned by a society that segregated and hid away people with disabilities. Even Sarah, Tommy's own mother, had moments of doubt about whether she'd made the right choice bringing him. But Elvis, whether through intuition or wisdom or simply an open heart, saw past all of that. He saw a kid who loved music, and he invited him to dance. In a world that often seems divided by differences, that story from August 3rd, 1975, offers a different vision, a vision of what becomes possible when we choose inclusion over exclusion, when we celebrate uniqueness rather than demanding conformity, when we create space for everyone to share their gifts in their own authentic way. Elvis Presley was known for many things: his voice, his charisma, his impact on music history. But perhaps his greatest legacy is found in small moments like this. Moments when he used his enormous platform not to elevate himself, but to elevate someone else. To tell a little boy, and through him the whole world, you belong here, you matter. Your joy is valid and valuable. Tommy Patterson still lives in Las Vegas, not far from where that concert took place nearly 50 years ago. He works with children with special needs, teaching them music, encouraging them to express themselves, always telling them the story of the night he danced with Elvis. And the lesson he teaches isn't just about perseverance or overcoming obstacles. It's simpler and more profound than that. Dance like no one's watching, Tommy tells his students, but hope that everyone is, because your joy might be exactly what the world needs to see. This incredible story of inclusion and pure human connection moved you. Make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of seeing people for who they truly are. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's acceptance changed your life? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more untold stories about the moments that reveal the best of humanity.